Dear friends, welcome to the channel The Eastern Front. Today I will show you the first episode from the series Soldier's Memoir, which is based on the conversations of the writer Konstantin Simonov and people of 7 nationalities who served as scouts during the Great Patriotic War, about their hard work on the front line. These people are completely different and their work is very different now in the peacetime. But then in the war, they all had the same job. Intelligence is probably the most difficult thing in the war, probably I think so. Because it's very complicated to go to the enemy armed to the teeth, crawl to a chain of German trenches. In addition, engineering structures are in front of them, like wire fences, several rows large and small. In addition, there are several rows of the anti-personnel minefields of both pressure and tension actions. Also, there are anti-tank minefields ahead. All these obstacles should be crossed by scouts, still sneak up on the enemy, remove the sentry as silently as possible, or crawl up and descend into the trench and instantly grab, shove a handkerchief into his mouth, tie his hands and take him through all this. This is the most difficult part of the mission. Scouts go in small groups to take the enemy informant. The more people go on a mission, the more dangerous, because there will be more noise. Someone will cough, someone will do something wrong. Then the scouts themselves can become an enemy informant. Therefore, intelligence is the most difficult thing in the war. At one time, I went in a group of artillery scouts. We used a compass, then walk along the landmarks and train the ability to choose them. According to these landmarks, it's necessary to determine where to fire. Then we were taught so that the landmark in the binoculars plus there is a sign there, and you watch when the fire is being conducted, and so you correct the fire over the target, shot fall to the right or to the left. And so they taught us how to determine where the enemy commander was sitting. Here, for example, I observe a soldier walking along the trench. He approaches one point, let's say the entrance to the dugout. And so he begins to adjust his clothes, put himself in order, shakes dirt from his clothes and buttons up. So this soldier goes to his commander. And if it's, let's say, not a soldier goes, but an officer, and before entering does the same actions as the soldier. So there is a high-ranking officer sitting in the dugout. The high-ranking officer would not have adjusted his clothes if he has to meet a lower-ranking officer. It's accustomed. So, this is a command post. Now we have to find out the necessary information. Or during lunch, a soldier goes and carries one pot. One pot means there is a commander. If a soldier carries a thermos, then it's already a whole group there, or a department. It was determined by such signs. In 1942, in the month of October, together with many sailors, we arrived to replenish our the 45th Baltic Division, which was stationed in the Kaltusha area near Leningrad. I got into the 129 Guards Regiment, where we were assigned to the regimental reconnaissance. This is where our service on the land front began, and our naval service ended. Here we immediately began to study all the land-based wisdom of fighting the enemy. Ivan Pavlovich, last time I remember you told me that in the first reconnaissance it was not so easy for you to shoot at point-blank range at a person. Yes, there was such an experience. So, when we first went on a reconnaissance mission, I was in the cover group. When our main group take the enemy informant and began to retreat to their positions, the fascists obviously realized that something was wrong here. They decided to cut off our main group and thus recapture the prisoner, and in any case destroy our group. And that's a moment I remember right now. I happened to meet the fascist first, then for a moment pity appeared. I couldn't kill a person, I just didn't have the courage or strength to pull the trigger. Here is a living person in front of me. There has never been such a thing. I saw death, but I didn't kill anybody so far. But I overcame this condition, and when I pressed the trigger, I see the fascist fall. There was such a feeling like pity or something to kill a person. All through he's an enemy, and we have to kill him, otherwise he would have killed us. A variety of people volunteered for reconnaissance. The sailor Ivan Baranov also went near Leningrad, and Karl Kurkevich, who later ended the war as a submachine gunner and scout in a rifle regiment, went on his first sabotage mission in a partisan detachment at the age of 15. I had my first sabotage mission with a group of comrades. It was necessary to destroy one provocateur. We went to carry out this task, came, found this provocateur, read out the order that for treason to the motherland is subject to execution, and we shot him in the forest. And who was he? He was a former military man. When the Red Army retreated, he stayed in the village. And what was the provocation? The provocation was that it came to the information of our intelligence that he had a connection with the Germans, and when the partisans passed through this village, he pointed it out and the Germans made an ambush and the partisans died. So you shot him. Shot, as I said, yes. And then what happened? And then we made a stretcher, put him down, dressed him in our military uniform, and carried him 3 kilometers to the central road. Then put him on the road and hung up a field bag. In the field bag there were documents of gratitude to one policeman who was in the district center in Luban, which allegedly has a connection with the partisans. Thanks are given to him for his connection with the partisans. And this was a real provocateur who betrayed the party members, Komsomol members. According to his tip, a lot of people were injured, and so there was a task to actually eliminate this policeman. The next day the Germans were driving, they saw that the allegedly killed partisan was lying. They brought him to the district center. There these documents immediately got into the Gestapo. For tomorrow the Germans took this very policeman, this provocateur, and hung him up, which was what we needed. Almost every one of the scouts told me about their own war from beginning to end. One told more, the other less, but in the war each of them did everything he could for the motherland. Otherwise he probably would not have worn the soldier's order of glory of all 3 degrees on his chest. It was near Vitebsk. They were standing there. One division was standing. Well, when our soldier was stolen from us, the Germans went to the rear and did it. This division was replaced. We were in the second echelon on replenishment. We were put right in this part, changed immediately. That's what it means to take the enemy informant, both for us and for enemy. Due to the fact that the Germans took the enemy informant, an entire division had to be changed, another one put in instead. Yes, a whole division. When you took the enemy informant, they were probably forced to change them. Of course. We know who, how, who the division commander is, which units, we will find out everything then. He will tell us. He wouldn't want to talk, but he will. One day, when we were on the defensive, a major came from the Corps intelligence department and set us a task. And he says, "Comrades, we're standing here, a whole division couldn't take an enemy informant for 3 months. If some scout group goes, they will be discovered, fired upon, but they returned. And sometimes it happened that the group didn't return from a combat mission. They chose a place to go on land, and we already knew that on land the fortifications are good. There are a lot of mines, the Y is in 3-4 rows, it's hard to get through. We chose a place in a swamp. All through the neutral strip was large, 800 meters. The shrubbery is so dense. We went for a first time after watching and got lost. We went in a circle and came out to our trench. The platoon commander is already ordering action. And we had a Siberian sergeant. Lazarev says, "These are ours." The platoon commander says, "If you disrupt the task, you will pay with your head." And he says, "Well, if I fail the assignment, then you can do whatever you want with me." Well, he proved that it was our trenches, and we were one step away from attacking our comrades. "You lie here," he says, "and I'll go to the front line." And he went. It turned out that our machine gunners were sitting there. He was right. We came with nothing and didn't complete the task. The major from the intelligence department of the corps says, "It's not good. We really need to take the enemy informant. The corps demands, the army demands." The next day after lunch we went. took 2 coils of cable, a telephone wire and stretched it through the bushes to a clean place, where we can already see where, so as not to get confused when we return back. This night we went on this wire, the sappers in front, the cover group behind. The sappers made a passage for us and we went to act. When we crawled into the enemy's territory, crossed into his trenches, it was raining. It was dark, nothing could be seen in the forest, no one could be heard. And ahead of us, in the dugout, sparks appeared from the pipe. The platoon commander ordered to block the dugout. The commander's order is the law for us. We crawled the 5 meters to the right and heard the voice, "Halt, Passwort." The Germans were asleep but probably woke up, because they heard our noise and crackling. The German soldier repeated, "Halt, Passwort." Well, then we immediately jumped out and got right into their trench to these Germans. There were 2 of them, they had a machine gun. We grabbed them by their pea jackets. Both were pulled out, the machine guns were taken away. We arrived at 4 o'clock already in the morning. The battalion commander also had this major there, the head of the intelligence corps. When we returned with the enemy informant, he shook our hands and ordered to the division commander to feed us and give us a glass of vodka, as it usually happens. To the foreman, he ordered us to give us the new clothes. You know, after you crawl through the dew on the water, the uniform instantly wears out, and he ordered everyone to rest. We rested 1 day, the 2nd day. On the 3rd day we came to the division commander and talked. In the division we were promised that whoever touches the German first will get a month off. He agreed and the 3 of us went home. Intelligence as a rule is a night matter, but what doesn't happen in war? Our next hero among many of his intelligence services remembered exactly the one to which he was sent during the day, unexpectedly for him, but as it turned out later, even more unexpected for the Germans. Said Nabi, so how did it happen that you went on a reconnaissance mission not at night but during the day? We found out the area, came back. I reported to the chief of staff that it was possible to take the enemy informant from here, even now. Please, if you can give me an order, I'll go now, this very night. Then he thought, no, it's better to leave this matter for tomorrow. Go, get a good rest today, and tomorrow afternoon we will act. Did such an order surprise you? Why during the day? Yes, I was surprised. Why in the afternoon? Then he told me. He says, many units tried to take the enemy informant, but couldn't take it. No one could take it. If you succeed, let the Chief of Intelligence of the division and the Chief of Intelligence of the Corps Major General observe. He also said their last name then, but I didn't remember it now. That day we rested at night. We didn't go anywhere. It was just 11:45 in the afternoon, so we went to investigate. We were walking the same way we had been scouting the area. And what was your neutral lane distance? Approximately 2.53 kilometers. And then you know it's kind of lucky. I walked up between the 2 embrasures and sat down between them, and then I call the scouts, they come up. Were they crawling? Full length is not allowed. There was a sentry standing here, he saw me and let's run. He got scared and didn't even shoot, he ran away. I said to the scout who was on the left, catch up with him, only not far away, and come back now. He followed him. I immediately went into the bunker. I had the gun in my hands. I looked at the 3 sitting, and I said, Hände hoch. They raised their hands. I see one can't raise his hand. I pulled them out of there, and the scouts grabbed them and ran. At this time I had 3 large caliber machine guns, removed the bolts and threw them into the river. We have no losses, we have brought these 3 Germans to us. And what do you think, when you jumped into the bunker, why didn't they shoot at you? Were they scared, right? First of all, when I went in there, they were doing something else. Men in trousers, tunics, you know. They didn't even have time to turn away to take up weapons to shoot at us. Of course, to take 3 Germans without loss in broad daylight, there is something to remember. Most often 5 or 10 people went to reconnaissance, and Konstantin Simonov remembered the rate of their reconnaissance and sabotage group. all 300 scouts for 8 days behind the enemy lines. Listen carefully to this person. His affairs are loud behind him, and his voice is quiet. We were alerted to the task one of the nights. It was completely unexpected for us. Maybe this is due to the fact that the command wanted to classify this work. We had drivers in each division, but they didn't drive cars. They just were, so they were listed. Could they drive? Yes, they could. They had a driver license and so on. On the eve of this assignment, of course, we don't know why, for what purpose, these drivers were taken away. They disappeared, but it was unnoticed. We have all the time. Some go on a mission, others come, and it didn't cause any surprise, questions, and so on. When we arrived to perform this task at the front edge, it means there were German vehicles, large vehicles that carry infantry, with canvas tops, diesel vehicles and several armored personnel carriers. And if I understand correctly, it means that you already met with your drivers at night, already in these cars. Yes, they were already in the cars. And this is a whole German column, did it turn out? Yes, a whole column, motorcycles, armored personnel carriers and cars. Only inside there are no Germans but Red Army soldiers. Yes, that's right. And how did your assignment begin? Firstly, the head of the intelligence department of the 56th Army, Lieutenant Colonel Ershinov, arrived, and our command was also there. He said that we were going on a raid on the German rear. The task is very responsible and important. He wished us a good journey. There were walkie-talkie and so on. In general, they were obviously preparing for the raid. 2 regiments broke through the front and we were led into this opening. That's how our raid began. The first task we performed was to release our prisoners of war. Not far from the front line, apparently they were used for defensive work. And the Germans were preparing to destroy them. There were 2 such barracks. They were locked. The barracks were already lined with straw. Gasoline was prepared. Obviously, it was planned for the morning. But we raided at night. The guards were killed. Of this military, they appointed a senior and sent them to the forest. And you go ahead, right? Yes, we went to catch up with the main column ourselves. Well, as they say, we made a decent noise with this column. We also carried out responsible tasks. In particular, 1 German airfield was destroyed, and in my opinion, the division headquarters. Did you capture the planes at the airfield? The planes were burned, some were shot, not a single plane took off. It was at night. And how did you capture the division headquarters? There was a general there and also senior officers. Our main task was to destroy manpower, to cause panic, to carry out disorganization. And the Germans were taken out for interrogation or destroyed there on the spot. We sent them to the forest too. In particular, this general was sent to the forest with his wounded. The wounded and the guard were, well, a small part of the healthy ones. They were sent with a walkie-talkie and they were there while our command was deciding what to do next. When the division headquarters was destroyed, in my opinion, someone even flew in by plane from the command of the Soviet army. Interrogate, right? Yes, for questioning. And you go ahead? Yes, that's all 7 or 8 days, well, practically didn't close our eyes. So we performed the task at night and hid during the day. So what kind of dream during the day? Firstly, the ears are on the top of the head. Germans are all around. Secondly, it was impossible to eat normally. Bonfires and fire was not allowed at all. We ate, therefore, dry rations. Well, 7 to 8 days on dry rations is not so easy. Well, in general, the tension was very great. When we stayed at last night, we no longer have the strength. Where we fell, we lay there. We were stripped, ragged, overgrown, with the 7-day beards. And at the end of the operation, remain only 18 people alive. And are there any officers left among them? No, the officers were all wounded. The senior sergeant was left alone. And what about the company commander? The company commander was also seriously wounded. His legs were broken, he was evacuated. Well, and the end of the task, how was it? We had a walkie-talkie. We had several walkie-talkies, so by the end there was one left. The senior sergeant obviously reported to us, which means that the head of the intelligence department, Lieutenant Colonel Orshinov, has arrived. The senior sergeant lined everyone up properly and reported to him. When he saw us, this Lieutenant Colonel Orshinov, first of all, turned away and in my opinion shed tears and rapidly wept away from the eyes. Well, just imagine sending 300 people, all of them were guys in uniform and so on. So they were fine dressed, equipped, armed, and there were 18 left. Then he turned around, congratulated us all on the excellent performance of the combat mission, told us that everyone would be awarded, the people who participated in this operation, told us where to arrive, well, and then he left. 18 reached and completed the task to the end, 70 died, and all the rest went to the medical units and to the hospital. And there they were already catching up with the awards for the feat. At the front it often happened that the scouts and the soldiers received awards already in the hospitals, but also searched for their fellow soldiers, old comrades. Intelligence officer Ruben Papayan, who went through the several hospitals, told me not about how he went to intelligence and captured an enemy informant, but about how he himself was captured. I was an experienced scout in the regiment. People knew me, they wrote about me in the newspapers. I lost a lot of friends in one of the fights. Kurkevich, our intelligence chief, was killed. My friend Solovyov and many died in this battle. When rumors reached my military unit in which I served that I was alive and stay in such a hospital, no one believed it. It can't be, Ruben died. When the train was passing by Petrozavodsk, at the train station the scouts, my friend who survived the battle, asked the regiment commander, "Hold the train for half an hour, we will just make sure it's Ruben or not Ruben and come back." The regimental commander didn't believe it himself. "It can't be," he says. "I even signed the notice of Ruben's death." In general, the guys came to the hospital, so they persuaded the commander to hold the train? Yes, they persuaded the regiment commander to detain the train at the station. He allowed the scouts, "Go make sure and come back right away." They came. I don't know how they entered the hospital school. I was lying on the second floor. I woke up at 5-6 o'clock in the morning. It was already dawn. And when they found me, I was even surprised how they could find the ward in which I was lying. And there, in the middle of the corridor, the nurse on duty was sitting. I don't know how she was persuaded. And they came in, woke me up, "Ruben, Ruben," and I think it's a dream, and I'm talking to them. I opened my eyes and saw Yegorov, Saltykov and Maximov. They were dressing me and there were wounded people lying in the ward. And they dressed me, who took off his hat, who took off his boots. They gave me their clothes. Apparently, they had planned it in advance. The scouts are savvy guys. Apparently, they came to the hospital with a purpose. All through, the regiment commander said, "Just make sure and come back. Otherwise, the echelon will move." He delayed the train, delayed it for half an hour. And I see, they tied the sheets and lowered them from the second floor, because apparently the door is closed and they may have come in from there, through the window or how, I don't understand. It was a winter, they let me down like that. And to be honest, I didn't want to part with the hospital. There were very good doctors there. It still kind of annoys me. They treated me so diligently, appreciated me, treasured me. I've done 1,000 surgeries, but this one is my pride. That's what the professor said, who saved my life. Did they let you down through the window? Yes, they lowered me by the hands and ran to the train station. I didn't want to leave the hospital, but not because I don't want to fight again. They were just so proud of me that they put such a seriously wounded man on his feet. As soon as they brought me to the train station, they immediately put me under the bunks on the train. After 10-15 minutes, the alarm rose in the hospital that the wounded man was stolen. I will never forget the next episode of my life. Nurse Masha with a book in her hands, crying. She was a nurse, and duty nurse Anya also came. They say, "Well, at least sign that you took the wounded man. They will put us on trial." I heard this from under the bunk, and I couldn't stand it anymore. And what do the scouts say? And the scouts say, no, there is no such wounded person here. They're afraid that they will take me back to the hospital. Well, I tell my comrades in arms from under the bunk, it's not right, they treat me well. Everyone did something to restore my health. And my scout said, Ruben, we're going to reform our units. We're not going into battle, we don't want to lose you again. But I went out. Nurse Masha came and said, well, Ruben, sign it, because we will put on the trial. Well, I signed the documents and 10 minutes passed and the train started moving. I can only add that the train in which Ruben was hidden changed direction and took him not to reformation but straight to the war. Just like Ruben, I also questioned other scouts, not only about the battles, but in general, what was in their lives, what was interesting, difficult about their comrades, commanders, and various things that they will tell you about answering my questions. The scouts had the most valuable thing: we didn't abandon each other. That was the most important thing. We always supported each other, always. And the most important thing was not to leave a comrade anywhere, either wounded or killed. We had such an order, dead or alive, but we need to get a comrade out. We had such cohesion, you know, we could say we divide the bread in half. That was the most important thing for us. Konstantin Vasilievich, and what do you as a scout say about your commanders? If not about all of them, then at least about one of them. I remember this last one, Captain Timoshuk, was our chief of intelligence of the regiment. Well, he held on for more than a year. He was a man of a desperate courage. It came to self-sacrifice, his desperation and courage to recklessness sometimes. In this case, it can be said that the bullet is afraid of the brave. Bayonet doesn't take the brave. So he literally climbed into a fire and water and nothing happened to him. Well, after all, in the end, he was wounded, and wounded far from intelligence, by an accidental shell. A stray shell exploded, and both his legs were broken. And to you, Vasily Ilyich, which of your commanders are remembered? We had one guy, he went with me, he was good as a platoon commander. Korotkov was a Siberian, he didn't walk behind like the whole command, he walked in the middle. He was brave, he was not afraid of anything. The intelligence chief was a good one, he was from the city of Ryazan. These were the commanders, we were very lucky with them. They took care of us. He said, if I lose these people, these are the eyes and ears in the division. I'll be blind without them then. And in general, the life of a soldier largely depends on how much the commander protects them, right? Quite right. If the commander is good, the soldiers will go for him and will never give offense to him. Konstantin Alexeyevich, you and other comrades have already told me a lot about the profession of a scout. But just as a person, what experiences do you have associated with this work? What do you remember? Of course, it's impossible to say that scouts are not afraid of anything. Scouts are also ordinary people. They are not devoid of feeling of fear. I left for each task with such a feeling that you may not return from the task. It's hard for me to talk about the other fighters. Everyone was worried in their own way. Someone was thinking about relatives, about family. Those who didn't have a family said goodbye to their beloved, to the comrades. Of course, it's difficult to convey all the feelings. Vasily Ilyich, what did you feel before you left for intelligence? Somehow we got a task. Some were asleep and some were not. Most were not asleep. Because each of us thought that he was going to reconnaissance. And whether he will come back is not clear. So it was restless in my soul. And what was the hardest, the most difficult in the work of a scout? Well, in the war, the scout always had to be wet as usual. You go on a mission and return all wet, another time there is nowhere to dry things. The food cloths are wet, the uniforms are wet. Another time we came from a mission and there was no dugout. So somewhere under the Christmas tree in 2 overcoats, we lay down on one, put on the other. In the snow it was hard for us, because we need rest, because we walked at night, rest was required. So we were powerless when we didn't rest, of course. That was the hardest thing for us. And the suppers were always the same with you or not? No, the suppers were changed, because without suppers we are nowhere. We were always given to suppers. Were there among the suppers such as you are used to, with whom you often went on reconnaissance? Of course, there were some brave guys, so they gave us this too. Their job was to cut through the wire and clear the passages. We go forward and they stay and wait for us. They will not come back alone, but they already coming back with us. They were waiting for you? They are waiting for us on the passage, of course, so that no one get lost. They make a small passage for us, there are only a few meters. That's where we are going. Anything can happen, panic can happen, or shooting can start in a war, anything can happen. Someone may have turned not to the right, but to the left, stepped on a mine and everything was blown up. Blew himself up and also made a fuss. But as you know, if the mine exploded, they were connected on the wires with each others, and after the first explosion, others started to blow. Just hook them a little and there will be trouble. So the suppers played a big role in this sense. Yes, the suppers played a big role. Did you remember the bravest, right? He only takes the good ones, and when he's a coward, where will you let him go ahead? You need to go ahead, cut the wire, and if he's trembling, such a fighter will definitely make a noise. We weren't even allowed to cough, we ate the grass. If you want to cough, then take the grass and chew. If you coughed, you were noticed, then you disrupted the task. And that's it, it's all your fault. If you remember the whole war, from the beginning to the end, count in your mind how much did you, Vasily Ilyich, go through and crawl through the war. From the Ural region to Berlin, 3,000 probably will be. Crawling 100 kilometers, that's for sure. Sometimes you crawl 500 meters back and forth. I ruined a lot of uniforms. Vasily Ilyich, I want to ask you about the relationship between the scout and the weather. That's how I asked other comrades, their attitude towards weather, because now we love the good weather. Yes, it's a good one now. Well, then there was a weather for the scouts. Snow, blizzard, rain with wind. It was our favorite weather. And when the weather was good, then it was already unpleasant for us, because it's created the good visibility for the enemy, and it was unpleasant for us, very unpleasant. The Germans were freezing at night in the trenches, and that's what they came up with. A German is standing at the trench, wrapped in a blanket. He will tie a string to a machine gun and to a button. When he falls asleep, he stretched back, the rope works. A burst from the machine gun will give and wake him up. And did you capture such machine gunners? Yes, there were cases when we took him and his machine gun was tied. He was in a blanket in a straw bus shoes. I'm talking to you now, and I can see by your eyes that no matter how hard the work of a scout is for you, but it's still an interesting job. Interesting work, of course. Some Germans resisted, but most had no time to resist. Because often they didn't expect, and when they come to their senses, they are already far away with us. You say you didn't gag your enemy, but others say they did. If a German started resisting, we hit his head with a grenade, and we went on. The desire to scream immediately disappears. Shutting your mouth is unnecessary, there is no time to mess with it. The main thing is to quickly pick him up and drag him behind the wire. And there you see, if all our fighters have already managed to withdraw from the German trenches. If there is no one of us, then we don't need this German anymore. As I understood it, when we were advancing, the scouts were the first witnesses of the crime of fascists on our land. Intelligence went ahead, of course. When we jumped out into the village, we saw people and children killed, and old people on the gallows. They bullied and treated our civilians in an inhuman way. All people were killed. When we came to Germany, we didn't kill the elderly. We didn't kill the children either. On the contrary, we saved them. And they were so cruel to us. Already kill soldier if you want to. But what does my father or mother or children have to do with it? All this spoke about how brutally they treated our people. Konstantin Vasilievich, you started fighting in Taman and ended up in the Elbe River, and the enemy was the same Germans all the time. How do you look at the Germans as an enemy? It was the strongest enemy in my opinion, at that time there was no stronger army than the German one. Firstly, it was a highly organized army in terms of discipline and armament. It was the strongest military machine of our time in the whole world. We were talking about the strength of the resistance of the Germans. How did it feel in your own experience? If we talk about my own experience and about the raid that I told about, 300 people went on the raid, and by the end of the 8th day there were 18 left, which in my opinion speaks for itself. On the Vistula, we started with 25 people in the platoon, and 9 people came to the Oder River. These figures also probably speak for themselves. Everything was taken in the battles, of heavy battles with a huge enemy resistance. Dear friends, that's all for today. It was Tim and the Eastern Front channel. If you like this video, please press the like button and write any comment. It really helps to promote the video and support the channel. Thank you so much and see you.